Speaking of falsifying scientific data, earlier in the program, let's do the other one. Earlier in the program, we started off with a clip of the Florida Surgeon General who is saying that he's trying to get rid of or calling for basically halts on the COVID vaccine because it is, I had the quote here somewhere, the Antichrist, or probably the Antichrist of vaccines. And God doesn't want you messing with the human genome. And therefore, my scientific opinion is that the COVID vaccines don't work. Here is Jimmy Dore. I'm sorry, I got the vaccine booster, and so obviously I have a cognitive dysfunction. Talking about from the Daily Skeptic, which is some vax-denying site that he's decided is real news, written by Will Jones. I wonder if that's actually like a
AI.
Yeah, exactly. Will Jones. I mean, it could be. I can't imagine someone would come up with that. Lancet study on COVID vaccine autopsies finds 74% were caused by vaccine. Study is removed within 24 hours. Now, you're not quite clear like who these autopsies are from this, but they were ostensibly people who supposedly died from the vaccine. So that's the universe of people. And this study supposedly finds that 74% of those people were caused by the vaccine. And let's listen to, I don't know if we should force you to listen to the 4 minutes that Jimmy Dore reads the entire article as
he works out in his brain.
Yes, he reads the entire article, and of course, he doesn't really know where the important parts are. So it's like he's reading like a children's story half the time.
He's reading the methods section, thinking it's like the conclusion section.
Exactly. Yeah. But go ahead here.
Listen to this. Lancet study on COVID vaccine autopsies finds 74% were caused by the vaccine. That got published at the Lancet, and they immediately removed it 24 hours later. Let me just break it down, and then we'll come to you for your comment. A Lancet review of 325 autopsies after COVID vaccination found that 74% of the deaths were caused by the vaccine. But the study was removed within 24 hours.
Pause it for one here. Now, I just want you to ask yourself a question. And now, Jimmy has absolutely no curiosity about this. And the site that is reporting this, what 325 autopsies? Like, how did they decide these 325 autopsies? Is it they just randomly chose autopsies around the world and they found that 74% of the people died from vaccines? That's not relevant here, because if, let's say it was 100% of these autopsies, which were the entire universe of autopsies that found that these people died of an adverse reaction to the COVID vaccine.
Right.
Of the hundreds of millions of people who got hundreds of millions of COVID vaccines, if 325 died, as opposed to, let's say, the 7 million that died from COVID, but we don't know, because this paper, which was a preprint awaiting peer review, so it was not a peer-reviewed paper, was taken down from the Lancet. Now, why? What is the process at the Lancet where they're just like, well, we always just publish stuff, and then we just realize, wait, this doesn't say something we want it to say.
Yeah.
It's maybe they all of a sudden realize, like, oh, wait, there's a problem with this study.
No.
So glaring. But no, it couldn't be it.
It couldn't be that.
Let's go.
Preprint was awaiting peer review. It was written by the leading cardiologist, Dr. Peter McCullough, a Yale epidemiologist, Dr. Harvey Reich.
Pause it for 1 second. I like how he says Yale epidemiologist, because Yale is valid when you want to hear from that guy.
That's exactly what I said earlier.
Exactly.
They're obsessed with credentialism when it's, or they eschew it altogether when it's the general scientific consensus and people that have worked and dedicated their lives and epidemiologists to understanding this. But when they can find their one crank who has an association with an Ivy League school or something like that, they'll blast that to the high heavens.
Yeah, I mean, and he says, or the Daily Skeptic says, a Lancet review found actually, the review isn't a study published in the Lancet, as some social media users claim, but a preprint that was uploaded to a server associated with the journal. It wasn't peer-reviewed or published in any scientific journal and was actually removed from the server by the journal because they're like, oh, this is some bullshit.
Okay, so it was never in the Lancet. Now, just to tell you something about Harvey Risch. He is a Yale emeritus. He is emeritus professor at Yale. And I suspect part of that reason is because of his time at Yale involving hydroxychloroquine. This is something that was put out by the Yale faculty. Now, so I'm going to say Yale in the same way that he says Yale epidemiologist. We write with grave concern that too many are being distracted by the ardent advocacy of our Yale colleague, Dr. Harvey Risch, to promote the assertion that hydroxychloroquine, when given with antibiotics, is effective in treating COVID-19, in particular as early therapeutic intervention for the disease. As his colleagues, we defend the right of Dr. Risch, a respected cancer epidemiologist, his opinions, but he's not an expert in infectious disease epidemiology, and he has not been swayed by the body of scientific evidence from rigorously conducted clinical trials which refute the plausibility of his belief and arguments. Over the last few weeks, all of us had spent considerable time explaining the evidence behind HCQ research as it applies to late-stage COVID-19, et cetera, et cetera. We're seriously alarmed for the safety of patients and the coherence and effectiveness of our national COVID emergency response when misinformation about hydroxychloroquine, HCQ, they say, and I tried to say the whole word, is spread when rigorous scientific evidence and consensus produced by the community of expert researchers in infectious diseases, federal agencies, and national global health organizations not heeded. Let us be clear. We are unanimous in our desire to see the development of therapies to treat COVID-19 and prevent transmission. If HCQ was shown to be effective, even among subgroup patients with COVID-19 in ongoing high-quality trials, we would join our colleagues in promoting access to it for all who need it. And then we should say that this guy, Yale, epidemiologist, cancer epidemiologist, not infectious disease epidemiologist, Dr. Harvey Risch, had a paper that was listed on the national NLM. This is another database that is just a database that you can upload. Wrote back in around this time in May, this journal published an opinion piece by one of the members of the editorial board, Dr. Harvey Risch, that reviewed several papers and argued that using hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin early to treat symptomatic COVID-19 cases in high-risk patients should be broadly upheld. As members of this journal's editorial board, we are strongly supportive of open debate and science. However, we must also be thorough in our examination of the facts and open to changing our minds when new information arises. In this commentary, we document several important errors in the manuscript by Dr. Risch. Review the literature he presented and demonstrate why it is not of sufficient quality to support the scale-up of HCQ. So all this, one of the guys, essentially, who is no longer at Yale because of his shoddy work, writes this thing, pretends that it was in the Lancet. And we should say today, this headline, and again, I'm going to be very specific. This is just an analysis by French researchers. But they found that nearly 17,000 people across 6 countries, this is just there needs to be more research on this. 17,000 people across 6 countries may have died because they took hydroxychloroquine during the first wave of COVID-19 in 2020. This is a new analysis published by French researchers. In February, March, the use of this treatment was widely promoted based on preliminary reports suggesting a potential efficacy against COVID-19. Subsequent studies showed that not only did the drug have no benefit, it resulted in significant increase of death. The researchers from Lyon, France, and Quebec, Canada, obviously huge, Pfizer
totally.
Providers still prescribed hydroxychloroquine to some patients hospitalized with COVID-19, despite the absence of evidence documenting its clinical benefits. The analysis found an estimated 16,990 excess deaths across 6 countries: Turkey, Belgium, France, Spain, Italy, and the U.S. were likely attributed to hydroxychloroquine use. Researchers analyzed other studies that tracked hospitalizations, exposure to hydroxychloroquine, and the relative risk of death from the drug. And you know what? Ironically, it was cardiac side effects. That if you had any type of like pre-existing condition with the hydroxychloroquine, now we don't know, but the point being,
Yes.
that no, let's listen to some of this BS and then we'll get out of it. I mean, he just reads it like it's a storybook. This is his job now. This is how he drives his.
It's like doing a book report.
Yeah.
Colleagues at the Wellness Company and was published online on Wednesday on a preprint site on the prestigious medical journal. However, less than 24 hours later, the study was removed, and a note appeared stating that this preprint has been removed by preprints with The Lancet because the study's conclusions are not supported by the study methodology. While the study had not undergone any part of the peer review process, the note implies that it fell foul of the screening criteria. The original study abstract can be found at the Internet Archive, and it reads, "The rapid development and widespread deployment of COVID-19 vaccines, combined with a high number of adverse event reports, have led to concerns over possible mechanisms of injury, including systemic lipid nanoparticles, NLP, and mRNA distribution, spike protein-associated tissue damage, thrombogenicity, immune system dysfunction, and carcinogenicity." The aim of the systemic review is to investigate possible causal links between the COVID-19 vaccine administration and death using autopsies and post-mortem analysis.
His viewers can't read.
Here's the method that you used. We searched for all published autopsy and necropsy reports relating to COVID-19 vaccinations up until May 18th of 2023. We initially identified 678 studies, and after screening for our inclusion criteria, included 44 papers that contained 325 autopsy cases.
None of this says anything.
Yeah.
All they're saying is we looked for autopsy reports and we came up with some screening things. We're not going to tell you what those are in this. And we looked at this and we think 74% of them, of this 354,
Lancet said that like the methodology did not meet the criteria there in terms of like their selection process as well, which Jimmy's completely obscuring.
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy I'll read some stuff. This is from healthfeedback.org. The authors list included several names well known for having spread COVID-19 misinformation in the past, including Harvey Risch, Roger Hodgkinson, and William Mackis. The last author is cardiologist Peter McCullough, whose false claims about COVID-19 vaccines eventually led the American Board of Internal Medicine to recommend revoking his board certification in October 2022. It is noteworthy that
they're all part of the establishment.
Right. It is noteworthy that 6 of the 9 authors of the review are affiliated with the Wellness Company. McCullough is the chief scientific officer of this company, which markets supplements that allegedly protect against vaccine injury.
I mean, even the way it's framed, where it's like potential causal links between COVID-19 and death. Like, I'm not that familiar.
Put up the page.
Yeah,
this is amazing.
What is it? Like all green? And
get back to.
Is it in Comic Sans?
Get back to that pre-COVID feeling with some of our spike support.
Oh my God, spike support.
Yeah, kids living as nature intended. Year-round wellness for resilient kids.
Where'd you send this?
No, just go to wellness. It's the twc.health.
The Wellness Company.
Yeah, here we go.
Spike.
Remember the days? Pre-COVID days.
So I think maybe
Before
the
your
Lancet,
innocence was stolen.
how the Lancet was so quick to get that thing off of their server was that, you know how bars will have sort of patrons that aren't allowed in because they're regular, like
Yeah.
causing problems. Probably all these guys that have a pharmaceutical, like a supplement company,
Right.
Literally pharmaceutical commodifiers.
Except just this one is just like more underregulated.
exactly.
I like spike support.
It's more free market, so you can trust the medicine more because you don't get the government involved.
Let's. JR in Philly says I go to Blue Chew for my spike support. Let's go back to the video again. Sorry. Here we go. Matt's driving solo today. He's going back and forth. 3 physicians independently reviewed all deaths and
Independently
what does
at
that
their
mean?
at
Independent
corporate
from
headquarters.
whom?
Yeah, independently in the same boardroom.
78 studies, and after screening for our inclusion criteria, included 44 papers that contained 325 autopsy cases and 1 necropsy case. 3 physicians independently reviewed all the
Independently,
deaths
that's a
and
word.
determined whether COVID-19 vaccination was a direct cause or contributed significantly to the death. Their findings, this is from the paper, their findings, the most implicated organ system in COVID-19 vaccine-associated death was the cardiovascular system, 53%, followed by the hematological system, 17%, the respiratory system, 8%, and multiple organ systems, 7%. 3 or more organ systems were affected in 21 cases. The mean time from vaccination to death was 14.3 days. Now, that's an interesting stat that we'll come to back in a second.
really?
But
Oh,
most
great.
deaths
Yeah, it
occurred
is
within a
interesting.
week from the last vaccine administration. So they would consider those people, the CDC and the FDA and the government would consider those people not vaccinated.
What?
Because they don't consider you vaccinated until at least 2 weeks after you had your second shot. So when those people died, they were counting them as unvaccinated deaths from COVID. A total of 240 deaths, 73.9%, were independently adjudicated as directly due to or significantly contributed to by the COVID-19 vaccination. And so the interpretation, the consistency seen among cases in this review
believe all
with
these-
known COVID-19 vaccine and birth events, their mechanisms and related excess death, coupled with autopsy confirmation and physician-led death adjudication, suggests that there is a high likelihood of a causal link between COVID-19 vaccines and death of these people in most cases. Further urgent investigation is required for the purpose of clarifying our findings.
Where did they get these 340 autopsies that they examined? What was the criteria? They had to be vaccinated and they had to have died within 2 weeks of that vaccination, I guess. I don't know. I mean, we don't know what any of this stuff is. It's just all it's just junk.
Also, creating a causal link is a very high threshold to clear from an academic perspective when studying something like this. Like, to make such a claim, that should immediately raise alarm bells
But
for
don't
anybody.
you understand? No one died from the vaccine because the CDC does not count deaths by people who get vaccinated within 14 days.
Yeah.
This is all just junk. You know, what's ridiculous? Remember how, like, when you get the vaccination, particularly early on, you had to wait 15 minutes at the place? That was just so that they could say that this was not an adverse reaction to the vaccine because you didn't really get vaccinated yet because we don't count it for 2 weeks. It's just absurd. The idea that they don't count vaccinations for adverse effects until 2 weeks out is just gunk. They don't count it in terms of the efficacy of the vaccine to mitigate the implications of COVID. That's it.
Right.
Also, this healthfeedback.org write-up keyed in on something from the methods section that he read out as if it was impressive. But They write, the authors excluded a majority, 90 of the studies that identified in their search, while 25 of them were excluded because they hadn't conducted an autopsy or didn't report vaccination status. 55 studies were excluded without clearly stating the reasons for doing so. This is important because including or excluding such a large number of studies could greatly alter the results.
Those did not in any way support our conclusion, so we're not going to look at them.
Like, even those methods, and I mean, I'm not a social scientist. Brandon Sutton's closer to that, but I did do some of this in college, and yeah, like the methods section he read, where they're like, we looked at a bunch of studies and used our independent criteria to weed them out.
Exactly.
Like, what are you talking about?
What is that criteria? If it doesn't support our conspiracy theory, we're not going to include it in the study.
It's called the file drawer effect.
Also, we're going to pretend like this was actually on the Lancet.
Right.
It's a Lancet study, yeah.
In the same way that they
If
pretended.
you put some on the Discord, it's a majority report.
Exactly. I mean, it was the same thing with VAERS or whatever, when people would post alleged vaccine injury and they would count that as if it was some sort of verified case. It's total nonsense. Pseudoscience by definition.
646-257-3920 is the number. We will take a couple of calls, but not too many.